structural transformation for Africa is a very important policy reform, and it comes mostly because most of the economies remain very dependent on agriculture. Today, agriculture employs between 60 and 80% of the population in many countries still, also contributes a big share of the GDP in those countries, is the gross production in those countries. So the key question is how Africa can generate all the jobs that are needed for the young people who are coming online. Doing that through agriculture is not going to be sufficient because it doesn't generate as many jobs as you would need. So the countries need to transform, diversify their economies, which means, for example, instead of just growing crops and selling them outside as exports, investing in trying to process some of those internally, which puts the countries on the pathway to manufacturing. So instead of exporting mangoes from Mali to Europe, exporting mango juice or processing the pulp for inputs in other areas. The second key important aspect of structural transformation has to also do with the ability to add value, because most of the products, the primary products that are produced, whether it's agricultural products, mining, or any of the other exports that Africa produces, are sold on the commodity markets at a very marginal price. So, for example, you get a few cents for cocoa beans or coffee beans. However, if you can transform that into coffee powder or into chocolate, it gives you much more value added, and that helps raise the incomes of the majority of people on the continent. But the third reason for structural transformation has more to do with investing in the types of technologies that will be needed for Africa to manage in this environment of globalization and climate change. So what sorts of technologies will be needed to improve the productivity levels, because most of the small and medium enterprises we have are at very low level of productivity that requires adopting new technologies, changing the scale, how big the companies are and how much they produce, but at the same time adopting technologies that are more favorable to the environment. So, for example, transforming the economies to bring in more efficient energy producing technologies, which could be solar powered or powered through the very rich natural gas resources that Africa has, and that would also fuel manufacturing changes and so on. So structural transformation is a big word, but at the core of it, it means these kinds of things. But there's the dimension that's social as well, to engage more women and include them in the economy, that also requires structural transformation, and to change the balance of skills, to have more skilled people engaging in the economy along with unskilled people, so that the investment in education can also pay off, and that's also structural transformation. I think the key elements are, first, it should be context specific, because not one size fits all. So countries that are heavily dependent on agriculture could start transforming by transforming agriculture itself, making it more sophisticated, more mechanization, more scientific inputs and so on. Those countries that, for instance, have very little opportunities to diversify their economy can do that through making the few products that they have deliver more value, so investing in the value chain to add value at different stages and use that process to transform. Yet other countries can benefit through trade, and regionalization is a good opportunity for that, for the landlocked economies and small economies to integrate in a broader market, so that the transformation of the economies also has an opportunity through bigger markets and more opportunities for engaging labor across countries, which is also critically important. So I think countries would need to invest in different methods of transformation depending on the context that they have, the size, the number of products that they are able to produce, but also the opportunities within a regional context. I was very impressed by the events that were shared here. First of all, the research is very important, and people have been exchanging ideas on what has worked in other contexts, what are the theoretical expectations, what's the empirical evidence, and what are the other engagements that can be used. And I think that has been very valuable, so these types of events are very good for that type of knowledge sharing. But secondly, for networking across researchers who are thinking about the same issues, being able to bring the their ideas together to a level of a bigger voice that can be heard then by policymakers and other decision makers on the continent. But I think finally to be a platform for launching all the innovations in data collection and analysis that are needed to better understand and therefore better structure the kind of transformation that will be useful for the countries that we are talking about here. So I think this event has been valuable in all three dimensions because people have come from all over the world. Examples have been shared from Asia, from Latin America, from Europe, from other places around the world. And Africa has had a chance to tell its own story and for people to learn from each other here on the continent. I think that panel, which looked at issues of land, and particularly here in Ghana, Ghana is a country that has traditional and modern systems of managing land, and how reforms in land can be used to get more value and productivity, but at the same time without forgetting the traditions on how land is viewed. And the other paper was more around switching from use of biomass, which has a lot of pollution and other negative effects, to LPG, which is a liquid gas for cooking and other forms. And that was an example from India and the role that trust and cooperation can play as a method to engage in this type of transformation. So both of them were very valuable. Transformation of land as an input for more productivity, but also transformation of technology to go into one that is less polluting and more beneficial to households and individuals.